Welcome, warriors and seekers of ancient tales. Before we journey into the mystical world of the Vikings, please hit that like button if you're ready for an epic adventure. Subscribe to our channel for more Norse mythology stories. And let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. We love connecting with our global Viking family. Now, let's dive into this legendary tale. The morning mist clung to the cliffs of Ravensholm like the breath of sleeping giants, and I, Thorstein Grimson, felt the weight of destiny pressing upon my 16-year-old shoulders as surely as the leather straps of my hunting pack. The village below stirred to life with the familiar sounds of my people, the ring of hammer on anvil from Olaf the blacksmith's forge, the bleating of goats being led to pasture, and the distant crash of waves against the rocky shore where our longships rested like slumbering sea beasts. But my attention was fixed upon something far more extraordinary than the daily rhythms of village life. There, jutting from a moss-covered boulder at the cliff's edge, stood a sword unlike any I had ever beheld. Its blade caught the early sunlight and threw it back in brilliant flashes, as if forged from captured starlight itself. The crossguard bore intricate engravings of ravens and wolves, their eyes seeming to follow my movement, while runes I could not decipher spiraled down the fuller in patterns that made my eyes water if I stared too long. "By Thor's hammer," I whispered, my breath forming small clouds in the crisp autumn air. "Where did you come from?" The sword had not been there yesterday. Of this I was certain. I had climbed these cliffs countless times since boyhood, knew every stone and shrub, every hidden path and secret cave. Yet here it stood, as if it had grown from the very rock itself during the night. The boulder that held it was ancient granite, weathered by centuries of wind and rain, and the blade was embedded so deeply that only about 2 feet of its length remained visible above the stone. I approached cautiously, my hand instinctively moving to the sayax at my belt. Not that my simple utility knife would be of any use against whatever force had placed this weapon here. The closer I drew, the more magnificent the sword appeared. The pommel was crafted to resemble a wolf's head, its mouth open in an eternal howl, while the grip was wrapped in leather so fine it seemed to have been taken from some creature I could not identify. Strange symbols were etched into the metal, symbols that seemed to shift and dance when I wasn't looking directly at them. "You're beautiful," I murmured, reaching out tentatively to touch the pommel. The moment my fingers made contact with the metal, a shock ran through my entire body. Not painful, but intense, like touching lightning that chose not to kill. Visions flashed through my mind, great battles fought under blood-red skies, warriors whose names would echo through the ages, ships with dragon heads cutting through stormy seas toward distant shores where gold and glory waited. The visions faded as quickly as they had come, leaving me gasping and shaken. But the sword's call was stronger now, a thrumming in my blood that spoke of great deeds and greater destinies. I wrapped both hands around the grip, feeling how perfectly it fit my grasp, as if it had been made specifically for my hands. "Come on, then," I grunted, planting my feet firmly and pulling with all the strength my young body possessed. "Let's see what you're made of." The sword did not budge, not even a fraction of an inch. I tried again, this time bracing my foot against the boulder for additional leverage. My muscles strained, my face reddened with effort, and sweat began to bead on my forehead despite the cool morning air. Still, the blade remained as immovable as the mountain itself. "Thorstein, what in Odin's name are you doing up there?" The voice of my father, Grim the Ironbeard, echoed up from the village below. I looked down to see his familiar broad figure striding up the winding path, his iron-grey beard streaming behind him like a battle banner. Behind him came several other men of the village, Björn the Bear Slayer, Ulf Ravenclaw, and old Eric Storyteller, their faces curious and concerned. "Father," I called back, reluctantly releasing my grip on the sword. "You must see this! There's a blade here, embedded in the stone!" When the men reached the cliff top, their reactions ranged from awe to suspicion. Björn, whose massive frame had earned him his epithet through numerous encounters with the great bears of the northern forests, whistled low and appreciatively. That's no ordinary weapon, Ironbeard. Look at the craftsmanship. I've never seen its equal, not even in the halls of jarls. Ulf, lean and quick-witted like the ravens he was named for, circled the boulder warily. And how did it come to be here? This cliff top was empty yesterday when I checked the fishing nets. No ship landed in the night. No strangers passed through the village. It's as if the gods themselves placed it here. My father approached the sword with the measured caution of a man who had seen 40 winters and learned to respect the unknown. His weathered hands, scarred from countless battles and years of smithwork, hovered over the blade without quite touching it. "The runes are ancient," he murmured, his voice carrying the reverence due to holy things, "older than any I've seen in the burial mounds of our ancestors." Eric, storyteller, bent with age but with eyes still sharp as a hawk's, leaned heavily on his walking staff as he studied the weapon. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of decades spent preserving the old tales. I have heard whispers of such blades in the oldest stories, weapons forged in the fires of creation itself, meant for heroes whose names would be remembered until Ragnarok comes to claim us all. "Then let me claim it," I said, stepping forward again. "I found it. Surely that means something." My father's expression grew stern. "Finding a thing and being worthy of it are different matters entirely, my son." But he paused, studying my face with those pale blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to a man's soul. "Perhaps the sword appeared to you for a reason. Try again, but be careful. Some gifts from the gods come with prices we cannot imagine." Once more I grasped the sword's hilt, and once more that electric sensation coursed through my body. This time, however, I tried to understand it rather than simply endure it. The weapon felt alive in my hands, as if a great heart beat within the steel itself. I could sense its power, vast and ancient, but also its judgment. It was testing me, weighing my spirit against some standard I could not comprehend. I pulled with everything I had, not just the strength of my arms and back, but with my will, my desire, my desperate need to prove myself worthy of the legacy I felt calling to me. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I felt the blade shift slightly in its stone prison, but it might have been wishful thinking, for when I strained harder, it remained as firmly embedded as ever. Exhausted, I released my grip and stepped back, my chest heaving. The other men took their turns. First my father, whose experience in battle and smithcraft surely made him worthy. Then Björn, whose legendary strength had never failed him before. And finally Ulf, whose quick wit had gotten him out of more dangerous situations than any man had a right to survive. None could move the sword so much as a hair's breadth. "It seems," said Eric, storyteller, his ancient voice carrying a note of prophecy, "that the blade chooses its own time and its own wielder. Perhaps young Thorstein is meant for it, but perhaps not yet. The gods work in their own time, by their own designs." As the day wore on and word spread through the village, a steady stream of visitors made the climb to witness the miraculous sword. Warriors, smiths, wise women and curious children all came to try their luck, or simply to marvel at the weapon that had appeared from nowhere. Some of the more superstitious villagers left small offerings at the base of the boulder, bread, mead, small carved figures of the gods, hoping to curry favor with whatever divine power had placed the sword there. But as evening approached and the visitors departed, I remained on the cliff top, unable to tear myself away from the blade that called to my soul. The sunset painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, and in that light, the sword seemed to glow with its own inner fire. I sat cross-legged on the grass nearby, studying every detail of its construction, memorizing each curve and line. "You know I'm meant for you," I whispered to the weapon. "I can feel it in my bones. But what must I do to prove myself? What test must I pass?" The sword, of course, offered no answer save the whisper of wind across its blade. But as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I made a silent vow. I would return every day until I either claimed the weapon or understood why I could not. This sword represented everything I had ever dreamed of, the chance to become more than just another village boy, to write my name in the sagas alongside the great heroes of old. The walk back to the village was a lonely one, but my heart burned with determination. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove myself. And somehow, some way, I would make that blade acknowledge me as its rightful bearer. Little did I know that my chance would come sooner than I expected, and in a form more terrifying than any young warrior could imagine. 3 days had passed since the sword's mysterious appearance, and each dawn found me back on the cliff top, grasping the weapon's hilt with increasingly desperate determination. The blade remained as immovable as the mountains themselves, mocking my efforts with its stubborn silence. My hands had grown raw from gripping the leather-wrapped handle, and my shoulders ached from the constant strain, but I refused to abandon my quest. On this particular morning, the autumn mist hung thicker than usual, rolling in from the sea like the breath of Jörmungandr himself. The visibility was so poor that I could barely make out the village below, and the sword appeared to float in the grey void like a fragment of a fever dream. It was weather fit more for trolls and dark spirits than for honest folk, but I had promised myself I would try once more before joining the hunting party that was to set out at midday. "Still here, are you?" I muttered to the blade, flexing my stiff fingers. "Still keeping your secrets locked away in that stone heart of yours?" As if in response to my words, the sword seemed to pulse with a faint inner light, barely visible in the thick mist. I blinked, wondering if my eyes were playing tricks on me, but the glow remained, soft and steady, like starlight filtered through deep water. "So you do have some life in you," I breathed, reaching out cautiously. The moment my fingers touched the pommel, the familiar shock coursed through my body, but this time it was different, stronger, more urgent, as if the weapon were trying to communicate something of vital importance. Visions flooded my mind again, but these were clearer than before. I saw myself standing in this very spot, but older, wearing mail and bearing battle scars that spoke of great deeds. The sword was in my hands, no longer trapped in stone, and its blade blazed with supernatural fire as I faced some terrible enemy that lurked just beyond the edge of my vision. Then the images shifted, showing me deep forests where shadows moved with predatory intelligence, ancient burial mounds where the dead stirred restlessly, and finally, a great winged shape silhouetted against a blood-red sky. The visions faded, leaving me gasping and shaken, but their message was clear. Danger was coming, danger that would require more than mortal strength to overcome. The sword was not just a weapon, it was a key to powers beyond my current understanding, powers I would need if I were to fulfill whatever destiny the Norns had woven for me. A distant horn sounded from the village below, its deep note cutting through the mist like a blade through silk. The hunting party was gathering, and my father would expect me to join them. We were to venture into the deep forest in search of the great elk that had been seen near the old standing stones, and every able-bodied young man was expected to do his part. Reluctantly, I released my grip on the sword and gathered my hunting gear, my recurved bow of yew wood, a quiver of iron-pointed arrows, my hunting spear with its leaf-shaped blade, and the sayax that had been my grandfather's before me. The familiar weight of weapons and tools was comforting after my futile struggles with the mystical blade, reminding me that I was, at least, competent in the arts of hunting and basic warfare. The hunting party consisted of 12 men and boys, led by my father and Björn, the bear slayer. We were a formidable group, experienced hunters who knew the forest's secrets and the ways of the creatures that dwelt within its green depths. Young Magnus Olafsson was there, my closest friend since childhood, along with his older brother Hakon, who could track a deer across solid rock. The other members were a mix of seasoned warriors and promising youngsters, all eager for the chase and the feast that would follow a successful hunt. "Stay close and stay quiet," my father instructed as we entered the tree line. "The elk is old and clever. He's evaded hunters for 3 seasons now. We'll need all our skill to take him." The forest was a cathedral of towering pines and ancient oaks, their branches so thick overhead that they blocked out most of what little light filtered through the persistent mist. Our feet made soft, squelching sounds in the carpet of fallen leaves and moss, and every few hundred yards someone would stop to examine tracks or droppings, trying to determine which direction our quarry had taken. For several hours we moved deeper into the woodland, following a trail that seemed to lead toward the heart of the forest, where the old gods were said to still hold sway. The standing stones were there, raised by our ancestors in the distant past for purposes now forgotten, and around them grew a grove of trees so ancient that their trunks were wider than houses. It was Magnus who first noticed that something was wrong. He had been ranging slightly ahead of the main group, his keen eyes scanning for sign, when he suddenly stopped and raised his hand for silence. When we caught up to him, his face was pale beneath his sparse beard. "Look at this," he whispered, pointing to a massive oak tree whose trunk bore deep gouges in its bark. The marks were clearly fresh, made within the last day or two, and they reached far higher than any bear could manage, nearly twice the height of a tall man. Björn examined the gouges with the eye of one who had faced many dangerous beasts. His expression grew increasingly grim as he traced the marks with his finger. "These weren't made by claws," he said quietly. "No animal I know leaves marks like these." "Then what made them?" asked Hakon, his usual confidence notably absent. Before anyone could answer, a sound echoed through the forest that made every man among us reach for his weapons. It was a roar, but unlike anything in our experience, deeper than a bear's bellow, more resonant than a wolf's howl, carrying within it an intelligence and malice that spoke of something far more dangerous than any natural predator. "Form a circle," my father commanded, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Spears out, backs to the center. Whatever made that sound is still out there." We arranged ourselves as he directed, our spear points creating a bristling perimeter while those with bows nocked arrows and those with only blades drew them from their sheaths. The forest around us had gone unnaturally quiet. No bird songs, no rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. Even the ever-present buzz of insects had ceased. It was as if every living thing had either fled or was holding its breath in terror. The mist began to swirl and thicken, taking on an almost oily quality that made it difficult to see more than a few feet in any direction. Strange shadows moved within the grey veil, shapes that seemed too large and moved in ways that defied natural law. And through it all, that terrible intelligence watched us, evaluated us, found us wanting. "There!" Magnus shouted, pointing toward a gap between two massive trees. "I saw something moving." A low rumble began to build around us, seeming to come from the very earth itself. The ground beneath our feet trembled, and loose stones rolled down the nearby slopes as if shaken by an earthquake. But this was no natural phenomenon. The trembling had a rhythm to it, like the footsteps of something unimaginably large approaching through the forest. Then it appeared. The dragon emerged from the mist like a living nightmare, its scales the color of fresh blood, gleaming wetly in the dim light. It was massive beyond belief, longer than our largest longship, with wings that could have wrapped around the village hall and still had span to spare. Its head was the size of a warhorse, dominated by eyes that burned like molten gold and a mouth filled with teeth longer than sword blades. But it was more than its size that struck terror into our hearts. This creature radiated an aura of ancient power and malevolent intelligence that made it clear we were not facing a mere beast, but something far more dangerous, a force of nature given form and fury. "By all the gods," Björn whispered, his legendary courage finally meeting something that could test it. "It's real! The old stories were true!" The dragon's gaze swept over our pathetic defensive formation, and I swear I saw something like amusement flicker in those burning eyes. When it spoke, its voice was like the sound of continents grinding together, deep and resonant and filled with the weight of ages. "So," it rumbled, each word seeming to shake the very trees around us. "Mortals have come to my forest. Tell me, little warriors, what brings you so far from your safe villages and warm hearths?" None of us could find our voices. We stood frozen like rabbits caught in torchlight, our weapons suddenly seeming as ineffective as twigs against the mountain. The dragon's presence was overwhelming, pressing down on us like a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. No answer? The great head tilted slightly, a gesture that might have been curiosity in a smaller creature, but was terrifying beyond words in something so massive. "Then perhaps you are merely prey, stumbling blind through the woods until you blunder into the den of a predator." That broke the spell that held us motionless. Several of the men raised their bows and loosed arrows at the creature, while others hefted their spears for throwing. The missiles struck the dragon's scales and bounced off harmlessly, not even scratching the blood-red armor that protected its flesh. The dragon laughed, actually laughed, a sound like boulders rolling down a mountainside. How refreshing! It has been decades since mortals showed such spirit in my presence. Usually, they simply soil themselves and wait to die. "We are not prey," my father declared, stepping forward with his war spear raised. Even in the face of certain death, Grim the Ironbeard would not back down from a challenge. "We are hunters of the village of Ravensholm, and we do not yield to any creature, no matter how fearsome." Ravensholm. The dragon's burning gaze fixed on my father with sudden interest. "I know that place. There is a boy there, is there not? One who has been struggling with something beyond his understanding?" My blood turned to ice in my veins. Somehow, impossibly, this creature knew about the sword. But how could that be? Unless... "You," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "You put the sword there." The great head turned toward me, and those molten gold eyes seemed to see straight through to my soul. "Clever boy. Yes, I placed it there. And you have been trying to claim it, have you not? Day after day, straining against forces you cannot comprehend, growing more frustrated with each failure. Why?" The word came out as little more than a croak. "Why torture me with something I can never have?" "Can never have?" The dragon's laugh rumbled through the forest again. "Oh, young one, you understand so little. The sword is not my gift to you. It is your birthright, your destiny, the key to powers that will shake the very foundations of the world. But birthrights must be earned, and destinies must be claimed through trial and sacrifice." Without warning, the dragon's great head shot forward, moving with impossible speed for something so large. I tried to dodge, but there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The massive jaws opened, revealing a furnace-like interior where flames danced like living things. "Thorstein!" I heard my father shout, but his voice seemed to come from very far away. The dragon's breath washed over me, not the consuming fire I had expected, but something far stranger. The flames were silver-white instead of red, and they did not burn my flesh, but rather sank into it, suffusing every fiber of my being with power that felt like molten starlight flowing through my veins. Pain, unlike anything I had ever experienced, racked my body as the mystical fire rewrote the very essence of what I was. I felt my muscles growing denser, my bones becoming stronger, my reflexes quickening to superhuman levels. But more than physical changes were taking place. My mind expanded, suddenly able to comprehend concepts that had been beyond my understanding moments before. I understood now that the dragon was not my enemy, but my teacher. The sword had not been placed to torment me, but to wait until I was ready to wield it properly. And the test I had just undergone was not meant to destroy me, but to transform me into something capable of bearing the responsibilities that came with such power. The flames faded, leaving me changed in ways both subtle and profound. I could feel the difference in every breath I took, every beat of my heart. The world looked different now. Colors were more vivid, sounds more distinct, and I could sense things that had been invisible to me before. The very air around me seemed to thrum with hidden energies and possibilities. "Now," the dragon said, its voice somehow gentler than before, "you begin to understand. The sword was never beyond your reach, young Thorstein Grimsson. You were simply not yet worthy of its power. But worthiness, like strength, can be earned through trial and dedication. "What are you?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. The dragon's form began to shimmer and change, its massive bulk condensing and shifting until a figure stood before me that I recognized from countless stories told around winter fires. He was tall and imposing, dressed in a grey travelling cloak with a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed a face bearing only one eye. A pair of ravens perched on his shoulders, and in his hand he carried a spear that seemed to be carved from a single piece of starlight. "I am known by many names," Odin Allfather said, his single eye fixed on me with an intensity that made my newly enhanced vision ache. "But you may call me teacher, for that is what I have been to you these past days, though you did not know it." My father and the other hunters stood frozen in shock, some dropping to their knees in reverence, while others simply stared in disbelief. Magnus made the sign against evil, while Björn clutched his warhammer amulet with white knuckles. "The sword," I said, understanding flooding through me. "It was a test from the beginning." "Everything is a test," Odin replied. "Every choice, every challenge, every moment of your life is an opportunity to prove your worth or reveal your weakness. The sword chose you long before you found it, young one, but it needed to know that you would not give up when faced with what seemed impossible, that you would continue to strive even when success appeared hopeless." He gestured toward the cliff top, where the mysterious blade waited. "Go now and claim what is yours by right. But know that with great power comes great responsibility. The weapon you are about to wield has drunk the blood of giants and carved the fate of kingdoms. It will make you mighty beyond the dreams of mortal men, but it will also mark you as a target for every dark power that stirs in the corners of the world." I looked at my father and my companions, seeing the mixture of fear and awe in their faces. They understood, as I did, that this moment would change everything, not just for me, but for all of us. The boy they had known was gone, transformed by dragonfire into something new and strange. "Will I still be me?" I asked Odin, voicing the fear that gnawed at my heart. The Allfather smiled, and for a moment the terrible divine majesty that surrounded him softened into something almost paternal. "You will be more yourself than you have ever been before, Thorstein Grimsson. The fire has not changed who you are. It has simply revealed who you were always meant to become." The journey back to the cliff top passed in a haze of anticipation and transformed perception. My enhanced senses picked up details that had been invisible before. The way the morning light caught on spider webs strung between branches, the distant sound of waves that seemed to carry messages in their rhythm, the subtle scents that told stories of every creature that had passed this way in recent days. When we reached the boulder where the sword waited, I approached it with new understanding. The weapon no longer seemed separate from me, but rather like a missing piece of my own soul that had been waiting patiently for me to grow strong enough to reclaim it. I wrapped my hands around the familiar grip, feeling the electric connection that had been there from the first moment I touched it. But now, instead of resistance, I felt welcome, as if the blade were a faithful hound greeting its master after a long separation. "Come then, old friend," I whispered. "Let us see what wonders we can work together." I pulled, not with desperate strength this time, but with the quiet confidence of one who knows his rightful place in the world. The sword slid free from its stone prison as easily as a knife from soft butter, its blade ringing like a bell as it came clear. The weapon was even more magnificent than I had imagined. In my transformed hands, it felt perfectly balanced, an extension of my own will rather than a separate tool. Runes blazed along its fuller, not with fire, but with pure light that spoke directly to my enhanced understanding. I could read them now, and their message filled me with wonder. Here rests the blade of endings and beginnings, forged in the fires of creation, tempered in the tears of gods. Let only the worthy raise it, for with this steel shall kingdoms rise and fall. My father approached cautiously, his eyes wide with amazement. "My son," he said softly. "What have you become?" I smiled, feeling the power that coursed through my transformed body, the knowledge that whispered at the edges of my consciousness, the destiny that stretched out before me like a road leading to unimaginable adventures. "I have become what I was always meant to be, Father," I replied, raising the blade so that its light played across the faces of my companions. "I have become the beginning of a new saga." The sword pulsed in my grip, and I knew that this was indeed just the beginning. Somewhere in the distance, I could sense other powers stirring, ancient enemies awakening to the threat I now represented, allies I had yet to meet preparing for battles yet to be fought, and legends waiting to be born from the choices I would make in the days to come. But for now, it was enough to stand on this clifftop with my friends and family around me, holding a blade that had chosen me as surely as I had chosen it, and knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with courage, honor, and the strength that comes from understanding one's true purpose in the world. The boy who had first grasped this sword 3 days ago was gone forever. In his place stood Thorstein Grimson, bearer of the Blade of Endings and Beginnings, student of the All-Father, and hero of a saga that was only just beginning to unfold. The sword had chosen him, and he had proven himself worthy of its choice. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey through the world of Norse mythology. If this tale of courage, transformation, and destiny resonated with your warrior spirit, please hit that like button, subscribe for more legendary stories, and share in the comments which mythological tale you'd like us to explore next. Until our paths cross again in the halls of legend, may your own adventures be worthy of the sagas. Skal.